You're listening to the most captivating podcast in iTunes. That's right, the Elite Man Podcast, where we turn average men into elite men every day. We interview the very best experts from the lifestyle, health, fitness, social, and even entrepreneurial worlds. And with their help, we give you some of the best advice on the planet. Subscribe now if you haven't already and enjoy the show. And oh yeah, if you really enjoy it, leave us a review. On today's episode number 244, entitled Confessions of a Mob Boss, How One of the Richest and Most Notorious Gangsters in History Survived Prison, Criminal Rivals, and Leaving the Mafia, I chat with Michael Franzese. Michael Franzese is a former mob boss of the Colombo crime family in New York who had his most affluent time generated between $5 to $10 million per week from his legal and illegal businesses. In today's episode, Michael talks about his many years spent in the Colombo crime family, what he did to get in, how he shot his way to the very top, and how he made so much more money than everyone else. He covers his sit-downs with bosses like John Gotti, his gas tax fraud which netted him multi-millions every single week, his careful strategy to avoid being caught by the police, and the truths and lies about the mob in America. Michael also talks about leaving the life, why he changed his life for the better the day he quit, and what he's been doing for the past few years. If you're wondering what the Mafia is really like, what the gangsters from the movie Goodfellas were actually like, what really happened to Jimmy Hoffa and JFK, and so many other inside stories about the Italian Mafia, check this episode out now. You are going to love it. If you haven't checked out our YouTube channel yet, there's two reasons why. A, you're probably living under a rock and you haven't listened to any other Elite Man podcasts in the past. Or B, you're completely insane and you've just ignored all the messages that I've told you to check them out in the past. Either way, make sure you check it out right now. This is your last chance if you have not checked it out yet. And if it's been a while since you've checked some of our videos out, make sure you go back on and check them out today. I'm telling you, you are going to love some of our new videos. Go to elitemanmagazine.com/YouTube and check them out today. Make sure you like some of the videos if you like them, comment on some of the videos to leave your feedback, and subscribe to our channel if you have not subscribed yet. And also, if you want to be super helpful and go one step further as an elite man, share some of our videos on your social media with some of your friends. I really do appreciate it personally, and I know my team does as well. We're trying to grow this as much as possible, so spreading that message with some of your friends who can benefit from watching these videos is one of the best things you can do for them and also for us. Again, go to elitemanmagazine.com/YouTube and check our channel out. You are going to love it. All right, guys, we're live. It's Justin Stenstrom from elitemanmagazine.com, and my guest today is Michael Franzese from michaelfranzese.com. Michael, thanks so much for coming on the show, man.
Thank you, Justin.
Yeah, this is a bit of a different episode than we've done in the past. I don't think we've ever done anything real similar to this, but I mentioned to you a moment ago, I'm a big fan of yours. I've heard a few different interviews that you were on and a bunch of speeches that you give now. You're a public speaker, keynote speaker now, and have changed your life around dramatically in the past few years, especially. But you actually were a boss in the mob, or the Mafia, as it's known, and probably, what was it, the 80s or 90s?
Yeah, I started in the early 70s and right through the mid 90s, yes.
Okay, cool. So we'll actually just pick it up from there. How did you get your start into being in the Mafia? And I know your father was involved. Actually, I know a lot more, but I want the kind of audience to know. How did you get into the Mafia itself?
Well, you know, when you get into that life, you just can't go up to somebody that part of that life and say, I'd like to join. Somebody has to propose you, has to vouch for you, say that, you know, you have what it takes to be a member of that life. In my case, it was my father. My father was a pretty prominent figure. He was at one time the underboss of the Colombo family, one of the 5 New York La Cosa Nostra families. And, you know, originally I wasn't destined for this life. I was actually a college kid. I was going to be a doctor, but my dad got in some real trouble. And he eventually drew a 50-year prison sentence, and he was convicted in federal court of masterminding a nationwide string of bank robberies. My life kind of turned around at that point. I was 17, 18 years old when my dad got convicted, eventually went to prison on that. Joe Colombo kind of, you know, took me under his wing. Obviously, we knew him well, and we knew my dad well, and you know, things just changed. My mentality changed, and I wanted to help my dad get out of prison, and he thought the best way to do that was for me to become a member of his life.
All right. So you guys were part of the Colombo family?
Yes.
And he was the underboss. So he was the guy right under Joe Colombo?
Correct, yes.
For how many years was he the underboss? Was it just a short amount of time, or was it for like many years?
Well, it was a short amount of time initially because he got cut down and went to prison, but it was during the early 60s.
Okay.
And then actually, my dad is 102 years old now. And
Wow, he's still alive.
Oh,
shit.
Still alive. And a couple of years back, he was appointed underboss again. But that's changed now also. Now he's pretty well retired.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. Actually, the last, I think, interview I heard was something that your brother was on drugs or something. He helped him get like convicted at like age 96 or 97. So he actually went to prison and then he just came out again.
Yeah, my dad did a total of 40 years on this whole 50-year sentence, and then another conviction that he got combined with that. But yeah, unfortunately, my brother had a drug problem for most of his life, and at some point he got in trouble, cooperated with the government, and actually cooperated against my father, testified against him back in I think it was 2010, and sent my father back to prison on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was sad.
He's out now. Yeah, very sad. Your father's out now, though?
Yeah, he was released in 2017. He was 100 years old at the time of his release. He was the oldest federal inmate in the system. And right now is the oldest living made man in America, quite possibly the world. I don't think anybody's involved in that life at that age.
That's pretty cool. What is his name, by the way? I don't know if I've ever got that.
His real name is John, but everybody knows him as Sonny. Sonny's his name.
Sonny, yeah. I remember hearing that now. Is he living like with you now out in California?
No, he's, at 102, he has some ailments. He's in a wheelchair. He's got phlebitis in his leg. So he's right now in a VA hospital in New York. And believe it or not, he's still on parole. He's the oldest living parolee in America. So he's still got to watch himself at the age of 102. But he gets off parole in next June, I believe.
Wow, that's awesome, man. Good for him, though. 102, still plugging away.
Still plugging away.
Yeah. So when you get into it at an early age, your father, as far as I remember, he was in prison at the time. He talks to probably Joe Colombo or someone else up there and just basically says like, Michael, I'm not going to tell you all kinds of stuff to do. Just talk to this guy and then he's going to set you up and you take it from there. What were your first thoughts when you entered into this life? Did you want to do it for like your own selfish reasons or was there some other kind of real motive?
No, honestly, Justin, I had no preconceived desire to be part of that life. I mean, I was an athlete in school. I was going to be a doctor. I was a pre-med student when my dad drew this sentence. So it wasn't one of my aspirations. If you asked me at that point in time what I wanted to be, I wanted to play center field for the New York Yankees. I was an athlete and Mickey Mantle was my guy. But, I loved my dad, idolized him at that time. And I believe he was convicted of a crime that he was innocent of. And I'll take that to my grave. I believe that until this day. My father wasn't a bank robber. He wasn't guilty of that crime. We proved that in many different ways, but could never get the conviction overturned. So that motivated me to want to help him get out of prison. Otherwise, he went in when he was 50. You would figure 50 years on top of that, it was a death sentence. He would never come out alive. So, I had strong motivation to help him out. And he thought that was the best way to do it, and he knew I had it in me, to be part of that life. So it was really his decision to present me. And it was my decision to accept and go into it, basically to help my dad.
Yeah. So when you get into it, initially you're just like an associate because you're not a made guy right away, even though your father is like an underboss and super high and respected up there. You're not automatically just like granted into that life. There's like a series of steps you got to take, right?
Oh yeah, no, you're not, it's not automatic. You still have to prove yourself. When you get proposed, you become a recruit, meaning that you got to prove yourself over a period of time and do whatever you're told to do to prove yourself worthy. And then when that's determined by the hierarchy and they say, okay, this guy has proved himself, we trust him, we believe in him, then you become, or you get, formally inducted into the life. So I was never an associate. I was a recruit. And then I got inducted into the life and became a made member.
Okay. How many years did it take for you to prove yourself and to actually, and what kinds of things did you have to do to prove yourself, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, it's just about, almost 2 years that I was a recruit. I was 21 years old when my dad proposed me, something like 21, almost 22. And, you got to do anything and everything you're told to do to prove yourself worthy. It could have been something very menial. Yeah. There's a lot of discipline in that life, a lot of authority. a lot of alleged respect. You had a meeting at 8 o'clock. If you weren't there at 7:30, you were late. You had to learn how to follow orders unconditionally. That's number one. And, look, Justin, I always try to be as honest as I can without being, silly about it. But, there's a lot of violence in that life. And if you're part of the life, you're part of the violence. And obviously it falls upon you. And it's a way that you have to prove yourself. And, I was no different than anybody else. You don't come in just because your dad is part of that life. And that's true of myself or anybody else. You got to prove yourself worthy.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a lot of things like you can talk about and then some things that you can't talk about as far as, criminal activity and just things that, have done in the past that maybe you don't want to mention. So if it's, I'm totally cool with you not talking about whatever you don't feel comfortable talking about. But what are some of the criminal activity? What are some of the crimes that the mob, maybe you guys or even other mafia people generally do? Like for people who have no idea, they haven't watched a ton of mafia movies like me and just followed this kind of stuff for years and fascinated by it. How does the mafia actually really make most of its money in some of the things that they do?
Well, there's so many different ways. Let me dispel one, fallacy that's out there, at least during my time. We weren't big drug dealers. As a matter of fact, we weren't allowed to be involved in drugs. In our family, we dealt drugs. We were told straight out, you die. You're not allowed to do it.
Wow.
So we weren't major drug traffickers in America. As far as activities, look, we could have gotten into anything and everything that we thought was lucrative. Gambling, just about everybody is involved in that in some way. We love, a lot of guys love to gamble and we love to be in the business of gambling. So, I had a number of bookmakers that worked for me. We had a numbers game, racket going, I would call it. We were involved heavily with the unions. We controlled the unions, and through the unions, both legally and illegally, we used them as a tool to make money. I had a lot of bank connections back then, and we did different things with banks and insurance companies. So, you could be into almost anything and everything. A deal comes your way, you figure out if you want to be involved, and you go to it. In the early days, in America, extortion was big. A lot of guys would take money off of shop owners and things like that. And to a degree, we did that through the unions, through our union contacts. But again, we were very diverse. I'm going to be honest. We could have been in any business that you might not even know. We controlled the sanitation business. We were big in, Hunts Point markets back then. We had just so much stuff going on, Justin. I can go on for the next hour telling you that.
Yeah. I want to dive into in a moment the biggest moneymaker for you and probably for your family, the crime family at the time, which was the whole gasoline taxing. I want to dive into that in a moment. But like how much, if you had to give a percentage wise, how much of the money that you guys took in was actually legitimate compared to criminal? Was it mostly criminal stuff and there was just kind of like some legitimacy there? Or was it a lot of it was actually legitimate and people would never know?
Well, you have to go back to the various guys in that life, the made guys and what they were into. For instance, I'll use myself as an example. I had two automobile dealerships, Chevrolet and a Mazda dealership. I had a leasing company. I had a couple of restaurants that I owned. I owned a production and distribution company out in California where we would produce and distribute films. And all of them were money-making operations, okay? And I did very well with them. On the other hand, when you get into the gas tax scheme, I created a scheme to defraud the government out of tax on every gallon of gasoline. And that was by far the biggest moneymaker that I had because it was the biggest moneymaker we all had at that time. So, but again, I was one guy that was into business on both ends. I was into legitimate and illegal business. A lot of guys were not, they were mostly on the street trying to earn a living, doing some gambling or doing some shakedowns or, a lot of different things. So, I was fortunate. I knew how to use that life to benefit me in business. So everybody was into something illegal, everybody. It's hard to say who was making more money illegally or legally. It's kind of hard to say that.
Yeah. But you apparently landed on it wasn't Forbes, but it was another type of list like that where you landed on it probably like mid 80s or something. And you were the highest grossing mafia guy in the country or in the world. And I think you were maybe like top 15 or top 10 all time, which was kind of cool in one sense, but on the other sense, it put you on the spotlight and kind of, made that spotlight a lot bigger for like the police and all that kind of FBI to kind of look at you more heavily. What was that list called? What am I referring to here?
It was Fortune magazine's list. It was written in '86, and it was the 50 biggest and wealthiest mob bosses in the country. And I was actually the youngest guy on the list. It was the top 50, and I was number 18 at that time. And they featured me in the article saying, that I was the biggest money maker or whatever. Another magazine said I was the biggest money maker since Al Capone for the mob. I don't pay much attention to that. I did what I did, and I made a lot of money for myself and for other people. It didn't do me well as far as the government was concerned, because it put me, a bullseye on my back, and I paid the price for that. But it was interesting.
So, how much money were you actually making at the time? And I'm just kind of thinking too, how did Fortune ever even figure out how much money you were making? Did they have some kind of informants leaking that stuff to them?
Yeah, well, there were a lot of informants started to pop up in the mid '80s, and unfortunately, I was a target of many of them because, when the government wants you, you're a meal ticket for people to get out of jail or to reduce their sentence or not to get indicted. A lot of different things, but my combined operations at that time, the gas tax scheme being the biggest, I was bringing in, $5, $8, $10 million a week, depending upon the week and the gross and the volume and all of that. So, I mean, I earned pretty heavily at the time.
And you were so young too. First of all, how did this tax thing actually work, the tax fraud thing? Can you kind of walk us through that? Not super detailed maybe, but just kind of an overview of how that works.
Well, at the height of my operation, I had 18 companies that were licensed to collect tax on every gallon of gasoline. We were wholesalers, and I had a connection to get the licenses. And it was a political connection, and I paid for it. And that's how I was able to get 18 licenses. And basically, in its very simplest terms, and obviously it was complicated to accomplish this, but in the simplest terms, we were licensed to collect the tax on every gallon of gasoline. We were then responsible to pay the government on a quarterly basis. And we devised a scheme to collect the taxes, not pay the government, and not get caught or audited for almost a year. So for every license, I got almost a year of collecting big money on tax and not paying the government before they came in and tried to close the company down. So, the plan was simple. The execution was a bit more complicated, and that involved accountants and, storage tanks and a lot of different stuff that we used to get the year, because we wanted at least 10 months to a year on every license. When the government finally did come down on us, well, we just closed that operation and started working out of the next license. And so it was a daisy chain. It just kept going. With different people in different places, different offices, so they could never catch up with us.
Yeah. So you didn't even care about the license at all. You were just going for that 1 year, like push to get as much money as you could and then just go on to the next thing.
That was it. We again, the scheme was in getting a year out of the license, so as close to as possible as we can before the government came down on us. And we perfected that.
Yeah. So when you're making all that money, $5 to $10 million a week, and you're in like your mid-20s, that obviously makes you look pretty good. And the boss who's the boss at the time? Is it still Colombo?
No, Colombo had been shot. He was seriously wounded. He eventually died from wounds. We had two bosses at that time. The real one was Carmine Persico, who recently passed away in prison. And then while he was in prison, the acting boss was a fellow by the name of Tom DeBella, and Tom has passed on now too. So they were the two bosses that I answered to.
Okay. And so you're making $5 to $10 million a week. I don't think anyone else is coming close to that. Like your contemporaries, people that are on like your same level, does that automatically boost your status in their eyes? And did that lead to you becoming a captain soon thereafter?
Yeah, I was appointed a captain as a result of, the money I was bringing in and the fact that I was a good soldier. I mean, I followed orders. I did what I had to do, and I brought in money. I mean, you follow orders and you bring in money, and and you don't get on the wrong end of the right people. or the wrong people, I should say, and you rise in the ranks. And that's what happened with me.
Cool.
So, I knew how to navigate that life at that time. I was bringing in a lot of money. So in 1980, I was appointed the position of capo regime. And that's, it's a boss because you get men assigned to you, other made men. You have a lot of associates. So a lot of people are answering to you. So it's not the boss of the family, but it's called the street boss. You're out there and you report only to the boss at that.
How many people are in the entire family, like your entire Colombo family? And then how many people are you in charge? How many captains are there? And then how many are like each captain in charge of?
Well, it varies from family to family, and from time to time. But at that time in the 80s, we had about 115 made guys that actually took the oath in the Colombo family. I believe we had 15 or 16 capo regimes, captains at that time. And each one of us had, 10, 15 men that were assigned to us. And some of us could have had bigger crews, some less. And then we had associates. Now, I had a couple of hundred associates under me because the gas tax business brought me a lot of people, and I was pretty diverse. I had a lot of different things going on. So I had people that were associated with me that were under my command, so to speak.
Yeah. A couple hundred of those associates, are those people you would actually trust at all, or are they just people you did business with and they knew who you were?
Well, they were responsible to me, and I was responsible to them. If they were to get in trouble or do something wrong, or, they had to answer to me for it. So was I best friends with all of them? No. I only had my inner circle that I was really close to, but, these guys were known as part of the Franzese crew. So they, they were under my umbrella, so to speak.
Okay. And out of that, like 5 to 10 million that you're pulling in every week from the idea that you came up with, the gas tax fraud, which is, your genesis, your baby, how much of that 5 to 10 million a week are you actually taking home and keeping yourself? Like, I know there's a lot of kick-ups and like you have to pay a lot of people off. How much are you actually taking home?
Well, let's put it this way. I was doing pretty good. I can't give you the exact number. But, I was taking care of a lot of people also. I was paying the family for their end of it. I had a lot of people working for me. But, look, I had my own jet plane. I had a helicopter at that point.
Wow.
I mean, I built a 7,500 square foot home in Long Island on 2 acres of land, and I had a house in Florida, a house in Marina Del Rey, California. So, I mean, I was doing well and no complaints at all. And the money just kept coming in.
Yeah. How long did that scheme last for? A few years or like just a short time?
I ran it for close to 8 years.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah. And I had the Russians involved with me from Brighton Beach. So, we had a lot of people working at the time.
Yeah. So how does that actually work? That's interesting. You brought that up. There's not just the Italian mafia, which is probably the most well-known and probably, for my guess, the most powerful. There's also all kinds of other people like the Russian mob, the Irish mob. I'm out in Boston, actually Taunton, which is south of Boston. There's like a Portuguese mafia that, isn't as big, but they're affiliated with a lot of people, probably Italian mafia too. There's like so many different ones, even like the Chinese mob. You go to like Chinatown. Did you guys associate with those guys? Did you do a lot of business with those guys? Was it like a lot of gang rivalry, like you guys killing each other because you're kind of like going for turf and stuff like that? Like, how did that work back in your time?
Yeah, that's a lot of stuff you see in the movies. We didn't have wars with other groups like that. The Russians, they were pretty well located in Brighton Beach, and they had a small gas operation at the time, so I just brought them into our fold. They were great partners. And, they weren't as structured as we were family-wise, but they were a great group as far as I was concerned to work with. We got along well, made a lot of money, and they knew it was our town. So they didn't, they kept they were respectful. Let's put it that way. Yeah. I dealt a little bit with the Irish guys on the west side, the Westies. Again, we didn't have any conflicts with them. As a matter of fact, we worked with them from time to time. So no problem there. I never dealt with the Chinese in Chinatown. Didn't have any issues with them. Everybody knew not to mess with us. We didn't have any problems with other groups like that. And if we did, we took care of it quickly. And a lot of time was just sitting down with the right guy and saying, hey, these guys are out of line, straighten them out. And that was the end of that. So what you see about groups fighting with each other and all that, it's all nonsense. even, in the 5 families in New York, we didn't war with each other. We didn't fight with each other. That ended in the 30s, we didn't have those issues. We worked along with each other. We've had disagreements that we settled amicably in a sit down, we worked things out, but we didn't go to war with one another. Whenever you saw a war in that life, it was a civil war. It was war over, power, over authority. It was never that all the families joined in together and had a big war. That hasn't happened, like I said, since the 20s and 30s.
Yeah. So would you say then that back now, and probably, I don't know if you're still in the circle of it now, but is the Italian mafia still the most powerful mafia or underworld kind of group in the United States?
Well, I don't think it is what it was back in my day, because in the mid 80s, the government really, they really stepped up their efforts with the Racketeering Act and the Bail Reform Act and Sentencing Reform Act, and they put a tremendous dent in that lifestyle, no doubt. Put a lot of people away, turned a lot of people, made a lot of informants, and took a lot of the power that we had away in the unions and so on and so forth. So, but having said that, it's not going to die in my lifetime. It's still there. It's still viable. Guys are still doing their thing. It's just a little bit different. But, I don't know. Look, if the government continues to keep up, tremendous pressure, it might be do serious damage to that life. But right now it's still alive and well. And there are still 5 families and they're still doing what they do. So,
do you know who the bosses are? Do you know them personally?
A lot of the guys that I ran with, they're either dead or in prison for the rest of their lives. I mean,
Really?
Just about all of them.
Wow.
Yeah, so the guys there now that are coming up are younger guys. I probably didn't associate with any of them. I might have knew 1 or 2, but nobody that I'm really familiar with. I mean, obviously my father, I still talk to him. We associate, but he's not really involved either. So, a couple of the old timers I still know. A lot of them are just trying to live out their life and not go back to prison where everybody came at one point in time. So I don't get involved. I'm really done with it.
Do you worry about any of these guys like getting upset that you're doing interviews like this or some of the other ones you do? You're not supposed to talk about this kind of stuff, this life, the past that you had, even though you're not involved right now. Do you ever look over your shoulder or kind of worry about someone trying to make a name for themselves?
Well, look, I'm cautious when it comes to things like that because I don't ever underestimate or sell people short. And Justin, I always said, I'm not going to make my way in life by talking bad about other people, and I had no real animosity to anybody in that life. I didn't I didn't have any really hard, bad feelings with anybody. I just realized the life was coming to it was going to be a real problem. I mean, I saw it happening. Guys were going away for 50, 100 years. The Racketeering Act. I mean, so many informants were coming out of that life. Guys that, I ran with every day. The next thing I know, they're in court testifying against people. So, I just saw that happening, and I wanted to get out of the life. Now, were people upset with me? Of course. You're not allowed to lead that life. I mean, I betrayed my oath by talking about it. But what I didn't want to do is, as a result of my talking, put anybody in trouble. And, I said a lot of things, but they was directed at the life itself. It wasn't directed at anybody in particular, in a large degree. And everything that anybody wants to know about that life, it's all on tape. It's, the Gotti tapes, and he didn't do this intentionally. Obviously, he didn't know it, but there's 2,000 hours of tapes on Gotti and his crew. Everything you want to know about the life is on those recordings. And that could be the same set of a lot of other guys. So, plus they have so many informants out there now that are telling them everything they want to hear. So I'm not giving any new information. I'm really not. And I'm not giving information that's going to hurt anybody. They're not going to shut down the Mafia because of Michael Franzese. So, people understand that. And, like I said, though, look, I'm in public. Somebody wants to have it in for me. They want to make a name for themselves. I'm an easy target sometimes. And other times when I go to certain places, I'm cautious and I'm careful because I know that I should be. So, look, I'm not a kid, not a baby. I've lasted pretty long in this life. And hopefully that'll continue.
So with that said you knew even back then that there was guys flipping all the time. There was guys becoming informants, people that you associated with, people that you did work with all the time were just getting caught and then, diming other people out. Were you worried at the time? Did you have to look over your shoulder at the time thinking that you were going to get caught any day now? Or were you able to enjoy like all the money you were making and all the things that you were able to buy and just the incredible life that you had? Did you actually appreciate it at the time? Or did you always constantly worry about getting caught and going sent to prison?
Well, how could I describe it? It wasn't a constant worry, but it was part of everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
You're in that life, that every day the government could be watching you. They are watching you, and you had to be careful who you associated with, who you talked to, what information you might be giving somebody. And when you became as big a target as I became, it was constant. So, no, I slept well at night. I didn't worry every minute of the day. And I had as much or more trouble than most because I have, I think, 7 or 8 indictments. I've lost track of how many times I was indicted, of 17 or 18 arrests. So they were constantly on me. But, I watched my father. It was part of my daily life. I guess I was accustomed to it. So I just lived my life and just fought them every day.
Yeah.
But I still enjoyed myself. Look, I had a plane. I used it. I had a boat, a couple of boats. I used them. So I had fun when I went out. We used to go to clubs at night, a different lifetime with me. So, but then during the day, I was very serious about what I had to do to make money, to protect myself, to be a good soldier, all those things.
If you want to get more content, more information, and extra bonuses I don't post anywhere else, make sure you follow me on Instagram right now. It's at Justin Stenstrom. That's JustinStrom. I'm posting pretty much every day throughout the week, most days out of the week for sure, but almost every day. And it's all kinds of information regarding health, wealth, business, life, dating, relationships, confidence, and so much more. I'm telling you, you're going to love seeing some of the stories I post about and the feed posts I post all the time. It's pretty interesting. It's pretty fun. I'm loving Instagram right now, so make sure you follow me, Instagram.com/Justin Stenstrom, or just jump on your phone right now, pull up the Instagram app, and it's at Justin Stenstrom. What do you think that you did differently to evade being put in prison like John Gotti did? Like you just said a few minutes ago that he was basically on tape, and it wasn't like he made a huge mistake. I mean, he got wired and he had, people ratting on him and stuff. But what do you think you did differently to avoid being put in that position and actually later on get the chance to walk away a free man?
Justin, I think I was very fortunate. I mean it because, when I look back, I see a couple of things broke my way. I want to make this clear too. A lot of people saying John Gotti is responsible for the demise of the mob and all that. That's all nonsense. Look, John was a bigger than life figure in that life. And, the media was responsible for that. And John was a little, he claims responsibility for the way he carried himself. And we get it. But look, there were a lot of guys that got caught up in things unexpectedly, got caught up with informants, got caught up. And everybody combined, we did damage to ourselves. So what I did differently, I was very fortunate in that I didn't get caught on any kind of wiretaps that really hurt me. Never. Okay. I was very careful where I talked. I never get on the phone and had conversations that I shouldn't have. So I never buried myself with my own words. And that was big. And I was kind of leery of the people that I had around me. I kept a close inner circle. And for the most part, that helped me out. Although I did have one big informant. My partner in the gas business was the major informant against me. But oddly enough, he testified against me in a big case Giuliani brought out, and I was acquitted in that case. Wow. So the jury didn't believe me. And as a result of that case, Justin, I'll be honest, after I beat the Giuliani case, I was on trial for several months, and the major witness against me was destroyed on the witness stand. I had some negotiating power. I had leverage with the government because they really wanted a conviction on me. And so when they indicted me on a whole gas tax scheme in the Eastern District of New York, I was able to make a deal because I had just been their biggest witness on a big case. So they were worried. So we were able to negotiate a deal that for me was life-saving, because I got a 10-year prison sentence, which at the time was like 10 days. We were giving out sentences like 50 years and 100 years. So I had a 10-year sentence, which means, I was only in my 30s, which means I still had a life ahead of me when I got out. I had a big restitution and fine and all that stuff, but they didn't understand that in making that deal, I intended to walk away. So what I did at that time is, in making the deal, I got immunity for any past crimes that I might have committed up until that point, except for murder. But I knew I didn't have to worry about that. So I knew that if I walked away from that life, I'd do my prison time, I'd have a clean slate. When I got out, I have a chance at least to make a life for myself. So that was my strategy. And fortunately, it worked out. I mean, there were a lot of the challenges along the way, don't get me wrong. And I was right about some things, wrong about others. But here I am all these years later. So at the end of the day, it worked out.
What year was that you got that 10-year sentence? And then what year did you get out?
I took the plea in 85. I did 5 years, was out on parole for a little over a year, violated my parole, went back in, and then got out in 95. So I did a total of 8 years.
Okay.
I was released in 95.
And then right after you get released, that's when you decide that you want to leave the life, or is it a few more years after that?
No, 95, that was it. I mean,
Oh, wow.
I never went back.
And that was basically the life-changing moment. Like after that, you started going down a different path completely. I think you're big into Christianity. Is that right now?
Well, yeah, I am a Christian. I have a very strong faith in God and Jesus Christ. And, I say it every week and every day if I have an opportunity to. That's what I do. And I've spoken at, over 1,300 churches around the world. And this is what I do. This is the main thing that I do, I should say. But that's the life I live.
Yeah. What made you get closer to Jesus and Christianity and your faith? Was it being like in prison for 8 years? And I know you did solitary confinement too for a number of those years. Is it in that dark place like that you find your spirituality?
Well, yeah, it was my wife and my mother-in-law that really introduced me to Christ. And I grew up as a Catholic, so I knew who he was. I just didn't have a relationship. But yes, the 2.5 years I spent in solitary, reading, studying, I don't like to say getting spiritual. That doesn't sound right to me, but just, reading my Bible and getting to know my God. It was during that time that I, became a believer. And I want you to understand this, Justin. I became a believer based upon what I considered very solid evidence that my beliefs are real and true and reliable. It wasn't like I just got some revelation or God appeared to me out of the sky. That never happened to me. It just was a lot of study and a lot of realization that this is all true. And it's only been proven to me even more over the past 20 years. So I believe it with all my heart. Now, I'm not saying I'm the greatest guy in the world, not the best Christian around, but my faith is as strong as anyone's.
Yeah. What were some of those things that really made you believe that there was, have faith that there was a God and there was Jesus and that you had a relationship with him because you never had one you said you never had one before that time, but what were some of the things that gave you that proof that you needed?
Well, I'm a New Testament guy basically, and I'm very into apologetics, which is, the study of defending your faith. And I look for evidence because, I've been to trial 5 times. I mean, evidence has been part of my life. I mean, I'm a guy that I want to see evidence. And for me, the evidence that exists in the Bible and the research and the evidence that exists around to support the veracity of the Bible is very strong. And I believe in it 100%. So, again, I like to tell people my faith, God first appealed to my intellect and then it went down into my heart. And, where other people doubt maybe the existence of Jesus Christ, I see the evidence very strongly in favor that he lived, he died, and he rose again from the dead. And that's the basis of our faith as a Christian. That's it. And I can speak to you for the rest of the week about that because I'm very into, again, apologetics, defending my faith. But I'll tell you one of the things that stood out. And, people say, well, how do you know this is real and how do you know the Bible is real? And that's a whole nother answer that I can give you forever because there's so much evidence to support it. But one of the things that really got me is that, when the apostles witnessed Jesus dying, they were all deflated. They all ran for the hills in different ways. They denied Christ and their relationship with him. But after they saw the resurrection, all 12 of them, okay, and I'll add the other 12, even though Judas was a betrayer, went to their deaths, believing in Jesus and defending him, and they wouldn't betray him in any way. People don't die for something they don't believe in. And it's not a coincidence that 12 people saw the same thing and died for the same reason at different times in life. That was very strong evidence for me, but that's only one thing. I don't want to say that's everything. That's only one thing, but it really stood out to me.
Yeah. It's very interesting. I like having different perspectives on the show too. And I'm a very spiritual guy, even though that word is kind of lame at this point. I am actually a Christian, but don't really go to church and do those types of things as much as I probably should. But I like getting, the perspective on things. And it seems like to me that that's really one of the big things that changed your life, is actually finding God and finding a greater purpose than the things that you were doing prior to that. Where do you think you would be if you didn't get that in your life? If you didn't find Jesus while you were in jail and actually change your life? Would you be dead or would you be in prison?
I 100% believe I'd be dead or in prison for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
There's not even a doubt in my mind.
Really?
Not a doubt, Justin. It's, the course that God has navigated for me, when I look back on it, it wasn't coincidental. He had a different plan and a purpose for me, and it was really him that navigated it. I just became obedient at some point in time because I believed, and he really did the rest. Now, look, that could end at any point in time. We don't have no guarantee that our life is going to, go on to 102 like my dad. When your time is up, it's up. But, he's given me 68 years, and he's given me 20 some odd years when everybody else predicted my death. Everybody. I mean, everybody, from people on the street to law enforcement to people in my family, everybody predicted my death when I walked away from that life. And be honest with you, I wasn't, cocky or arrogant enough to say, I'm going to beat all you guys. No. I knew that there was a very good chance that I wasn't going to make it. But I think God just, again, he navigated the course and said, no, I'm not ready to let you go. And until I am, you're going to stay there. That's it.
Yeah. Incredible. I'm sure, Michael, you learned a ton about business and entrepreneurship and the life skills that you have now from being in the mob and sitting through some of these meetings and negotiations and talking to guys like John Gotti, sitting across the table from him. What are some of the things that you've taken away from the mentality and the mindset that you needed to survive back then to use right now?
Well, negotiating skills were very important back then when you were as active and as high profile as I was, because you're always sitting down, with somebody negotiating a deal or negotiating for somebody's life or something like that. So, you really had to learn how to negotiate in order to come out on top. And I think that was a skill that I mastered at the time. I always was a very good listener. I listened carefully before I spoke back then, because I had to. People that shot off the mouth didn't last in that life, and certainly didn't make a name for themselves. So, I think that was important. As far as business, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not the greatest businessman in the world. There's a lot of things that I don't do well and that I don't like to do. So I don't focus on them. I don't concentrate on them. But I think I had two skills that served me very well. Number one, back then I knew how to recognize a good deal. And number two, I knew how to put the right people to work and get the most out of them. And, I just had a good way with people, and they worked hard for me. And you put the right person in the right place and you get them to work hard and you got it locked. You don't have to know everything. Yeah, so that was a talent that I had back then to make what I had going on successfully. I think I was better back then than I am today, because back then I was in business every day doing this. Now, God gave me a better path. All I have to do is just talk and, and just tell people how much I love the Lord and what he's done for me. So it's easy.
Yeah. It seems like, too, you mentioned you're a good listener. It seems like you have real good people skills as far as being able to adapt to different personalities. What was someone like John Gotti, who is very loud and very like in your face kind of confrontational? What was it like dealing with someone like him and then dealing with somebody else who was maybe more quiet and kind of reserved, so you couldn't really figure out what their intentions were?
Well, John was difficult because he had a tremendous ego. And, you know, I'll say this. I mean, and I'm friendly with his family, so I'm not saying anything out of turn that anybody else didn't know. So it was tough to deal with him on a business level because he always had to come out on top. So if you had any kind of confrontation with John, you had to figure out how to let him believe he was coming out on top, and you actually got what you want. So you had to know his personality going in. And that's the same of anyone. You know, I always tell people there were times when I sat in a room and I was the smartest person in the room, but I didn't let anybody know it because I wanted to hear what everybody had to say and let them think they were smarter. And there was times when I wasn't the smartest person in the room, but I wanted everybody to think I was. So it all depends on the situation and the circumstance. And, you know, those are skills that in that life, if you're active, you have to develop in order to succeed. And especially when you were dealing with the kind of money and business that I was dealing with, when everybody wanted a piece of it, everybody. There was nobody that didn't want to be involved. And there was powerful guys in that life that you had to keep at bay or you had to satisfy without, you know, ticking them off too much. So there was a lot of skill involved in that, I think. And I don't know how I got it. I was just fortunate.
You mentioned in the movie Goodfellas in one of the parts where he's like walking into the bar, and I actually didn't pick up on that until afterwards. I heard, you know, your name and stuff and saw the interviews. But what were guys like Henry Hill like and Jimmy Burke and some of Paul Vario, those guys in like that movie? Were they pretty accurate and depicted in that movie?
Well, I like Jimmy Burke a lot. I like Paul Vario a lot. You know, I knew them. They were a little bit older than me, but I knew them fairly well, and they were good guys, good people. I knew Paulie even better, and I liked him a lot. Henry, I knew Henry. Look, Henry was always a troubled soul. He had a drinking problem. He had a drug problem. It goes way back. I always tell people, Henry never looked better than he did in Goodfellas. He was never anywhere near that. Trust me.
Yeah.
You know, he was just, I mean, I liked him a little bit. He had given me some tips when he was doing that whole Boston college scandal, and I made a few bucks because I bet on a couple of the games. But, you know, that was the extent of my business. Look, the only reason they put me in Goodfellas was because I had a name at the time. I wasn't really involved with that crew business-wise in any way, but I had some name value. They threw me into it, and that was it.
Was Jimmy Burke as big and dangerous and deadly as people said he was?
Yeah, you got to understand, Jimmy Burke was not Italian. Yeah. You're not Italian, you're not a made guy. You're not a made guy, you're an outsider. That's it, bottom line. So as much, he didn't have real influence. The reason he got recognition was because he was an earner, and we always gave earners a little bit more recognition than those that didn't earn. But as far as him being an inside guy or being on the same level as made guys, he wasn't. And so they made him out to be kind of that way in that movie. You know, so some of it was accurate, but some of it wasn't.
And then the guy Tommy DeSimone, I believe his real name was. It was something changed a little bit in the movie. Was he as crazy as he was in the movie, like a wild man?
Well, nobody could be as crazy as Joe Pesci. He was just too good, too good in the role.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a wild card, but he had a reputation.
Yeah. Who were some of the known deadliest people, like killer-wise, back in that time? Like a couple of names that are maybe passed now or in prison that like just everybody knew, like guys like you not to mess with, and these guys are some of the guys you didn't want to cross.
Well, let me make that clear too, because people have a wrong impression. If you're talking about made guys, everybody in that life was capable. We weren't worried about somebody that might have been more of a killer than another guy, because if that's his thing, that's his thing. But that didn't mean the next guy wasn't just as capable.
Okay.
You know, because you had to be. Yeah. You had to be. It wasn't like, oh, if you want to do this, you can, but if you don't want to, you don't have to. No, you were told to do something. You had to do it, period. End of story. Now, if you weren't a real earner, well, you got to earn your way somehow in that life, so you're going to be given more of that work to do. You understand? Yeah. A guy like me, I'm bringing in all kind of money. They don't want to jeopardize me. Not saying that I didn't do what I had to do when I was told to or when I needed to, but for the most part, if you got a guy that's earning, that we're supporting, he's earning $1,000 a week because we're giving him a job. When there's work to do, that guy's going to do the work because he isn't doing anything else. Versus a guy that's bringing in, a couple of $100,000 a year. They want to preserve that guy because he's the guy that's keeping the family going. So I think you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So if one guy had more of a reputation to doing that, is because he had to. You got to earn your way in that life one way. If you're not earning money, you're going to do it away. So we didn't fear those people. We just knew that they were doing their job. Now, maybe I will say this. There was some guys that maybe enjoyed that more than another guy. So maybe they were a little bit more cold-blooded about it. But again, we didn't fear them. We just knew, hey, that's how he is.
Okay.
Kind of understand that? Am I explaining it right?
No, it makes perfect sense, actually. And I think I heard you on another interview say, too, that most people actually weren't like earners like you, or like to even like not even on your level, but like most people just weren't earning a lot of money. They were kind of doing more of the muscle work and like the, fighting and beating people up kind of stuff. Is that true?
Yeah, well, look, in our family at that time, we had 115 guys, made guys. I think maybe 20 of us were real earners.
Okay.
Maybe 25. The rest guys, we had to take care of them. Maybe they got a union job. Maybe they're doing this. So yeah, when there was work to be done, they're the guys that had to do it.
Okay.
Because you got to earn your way. So one way or the other, you got to earn your way in that life. So, but yeah, I mean, everybody wasn't an earner. Most of the guys were not earners.
Just a few more questions, man, then I want to wrap things up. But it's been an awesome interview. Really appreciate your time. I want to throw a couple like names out though, and just kind of get your perspective, because I've heard different stories on these guys from you and from other people, and I want your perspective because I think you know better than most. Jimmy Hoffa, what's the deal with him? There's a movie coming out, I believe, next month on him, on Netflix or something, with De Niro and them guys. What's the true story about him?
Well, look, I mean, I'm certainly not saying anything that hasn't been said a million times. Hoffa, look, there's no doubt about it. The guy met his demise because he was told to step down, or not to try to get back up, I should say. He didn't listen. He crossed the wrong people, and as a result, he got killed. And I will tell you this, that don't believe everything you see in the movie coming out. Enjoy the movie because it'll be a good one, because it's Scorsese and De Niro and the whole crew. But don't take it, as, okay, this is the gospel that happened with Hoffa, because it's not. And I know that from good information. Let's put it that way.
Like 100% certainty.
But enjoy the movie. It's going to be good. I think it's coming out Friday.
Oh, it's okay. Even sooner. Yeah. It looks like a really good movie, but the actual, 100% with 100% certainty, you know the true story about what happened to him, and he got murdered.
Oh, 100%. No doubt about it. And, like I said, that's not the question is right now, where's his body buried? That's what everybody wants to know. And nobody's been able to find it. And I can tell you, they'll never find it.
Really?
Never.
Do you know where it is, or that it just wouldn't be found because of what happened to it?
I know what happened, and I know they'll never find his body.
Okay, fair enough.
And you could take that to the bank.
Yeah. JFK, was that mob related, or was that just a conspiracy theory that the mob had something to do with that?
100% mob related, and these papers that are confidential, or what's the word? That can't be exposed. They'll never be exposed, because you got to understand this. The government will never want it out, never want it to be revealed that the mob was able to get to a sitting president. Because, I mean, come on, how bad is that? But you could take that to the bank also. It was 100% mob related.
Wow. So you think the mob actually hired Lee Harvey Oswald to do that, and then they killed him afterwards because they didn't want to get back at them?
Let me put it this way without giving it. You can bet it was 100% mob related.
Okay.
The details and everything are, no one's ever going to know the exact details, but I can guarantee you if those papers ever become public and they're not redacted, okay, you're going to see the connection.
Yeah. And yeah, the word's classified too. I just thought of it.
Classified,
And
that's it.
you're right. Trump was actually a couple of years back. They were saying he was going to release him, and everyone was excited. And then he didn't release him, and everyone was like, "What happened?" So,
Oh yeah, they must have got to Trump and said, "Are you out of your mind?
yeah,
Can't release those papers."
He didn't do it.
No.
Whitey Bulger, that incident, he got murdered a couple months back, actually a year ago now. What did you think of that? Was that something that like you knew was going to happen if he ever landed in regular prison with other people, general population?
Well, yeah. I mean, you get a highly publicized figure like that, who's definitely a government informant. You put him in general population, something's going to happen. So do I believe there was a setup? I spent 8 years in prison and visited my father for another 30. And I know the system is well better than anybody. And I can tell you that the Bureau of Prisons makes mistakes. And I think they put him in that prison by mistake. How do I know this? Because when Henry Hill was in prison and he was in separation, meaning he couldn't be around any other mob guys, they brought him to Terminal Island where there was 15 of us there, and they brought him there by mistake and put him in general population. And if it wasn't for the fact that I happened to see him and he saw me and he went in and PC'd up, in other words, he put himself in protective custody, he probably would have been dead within the next 24, 48 hours. And it was totally a Bureau of Prisons mistake. And the lieutenant at the time in Terminal Island told me they made a mistake. So could they have done the same thing with Whitey Bulger? Yeah, of course. Could they have done the same thing with Epstein? Okay, who was not mob related, but they screwed up big time. And now the investigation is coming out. The Bureau of Prisons made so many mistakes in watching Epstein. They were so negligent in so many ways. So the guy hung himself or whatever happened, they weren't doing their job. So yes, does it happen? I don't think it was a setup. I don't think the Bureau of Prisons, somebody paid them to put him in population. It was just a mistake. And believe me, our government makes mistakes. I think nobody will argue with that.
Yeah. Last name I want to ask you about is a guy named John A-Light, who's kind of making his rounds on YouTube and stuff. And I think he has a big beef with John Gotti's son, Jr. Is that guy credible at all? Or is it more that Gotti is, and he's kind of like they're just beefing with each other?
All right. Let me say a couple of things. I don't know John A-Light. It was before my time. I was in Gotti's presence many times. I never once heard of or saw John A-Light. When I was on the street for 20 years, I never heard of him, never saw him, never heard his name or anything else. Having said that, remember, he was not a made guy. He was not an inside guy. I don't care who you are. If you're not a made guy, you're not going to get that much access to anybody that is a made guy when other made guys are around him all the time. Look, I had sworn early on, plus it's not my nature, to make my name by knocking other people. All I can tell you is this, is take what he says with a grain of salt. I want to tell you another thing. This is common sense. I think he got on and he's claimed to killed 100 people.
Yeah.
I want you to find me somebody that was in World War II or Vietnam that killed 100 people. I want you to find anybody that you know that killed 100 people, unless they were a terrorist and blew up a whole building with 100 people in it. It's insane to say what he's saying and for anybody to believe that.
Yeah.
Okay, I wouldn't know 100 people to kill in my lifetime, and I spent 25 years, and my father wouldn't know 100 people that he had to kill. Neither would Gotti, neither would anybody else. I mean, Gotti was only said to kill 9 people. He must not be very good. Right? I mean, it's insane what he's saying. That's all I can tell you. Now, having said that, I got nothing against them. I am friends with the Gotti's family, and they obviously have a lot against him. He's made his name by knocking the Gottis. That's it. That's his claim to fame, as far as I see. And I think he should review some of the things he said. Look, his brother reached out to me, okay, quite a bit. I've had dialogue with his brother. And his brother has a lot of problems with what John is saying. So, look, take it with a grain of salt. And again, I have nothing against him. I have nothing for him or nothing against him. You asked me, and I'm giving you my take on it. Take it from there.
Fair enough. Good way to put it, I think. Michael, just kind of wrapping things up in a minute, man. I know you got to run. What is a last send-off take? All the stuff we talked about today, the past that you've had, where you are right now with changing your life and your new message, What is it that you want people to take away from this call the most? What is like the one thing you want to leave our audience with?
Look, first of all, I want to thank anybody for listening in. Second, look, I don't claim to be better than anybody else. I just happen to be very fortunate, very blessed that I made the right decision and walked away from that life, because it's not a life that's conducive to family or to a long life. Not now, not for the last 20, 30, 40 years. And I advise young people that aspire to be on the street and to be in gangs and all of that. I do my best to dissuade them and really tell them the truth. That's number one. I just happen to be, again, fortunate, blessed. I had the right people around me. I keep myself accountable to the right people. Obviously, I give all the credit to God for, navigating this course for me. And, I want to spend the rest of my life trying to, just be thankful for the blessings that I have and try to share it with other people. And when it's my time to go, that's the legacy I'd like to leave behind, not the mob legacy,
Yeah.
So, and look, I'm all over social media. I'm all over YouTube, and, anybody can be in contact with me. I have a lot of great relationships and associations. I respond to a lot of people on social media. I'm in front of, hundreds of thousands of people personally every year in my speaking. So, I get to interact with a lot of people, and hopefully I have a positive impact on them, because that's what it's all about. So that's really it, Justin, and that's why I do these interviews. I got a lot going on. They're making a movie on my life now. I got a TV series that's I finally agreed to be involved in. I'm excited about, because it's with a good company and they're doing it the right way. I continue to speak. I'm now going to be a personal coach and business coach. We're doing that, something that I've done, informally for years. Now I'm doing it formally as a business. I'm going on tour in the United Kingdom next month, and we're doing, about 15 dates there. So, life is good, and I got a great family. I've been blessed there. Great wife, great kids, grandchildren. So I'm just very grateful.
Nice. Michael, it's a great message, man. And I think you're just like an incredible story of changing your life around, especially the last few years, and really making an impact and helping other people out, which is, the best thing you can do. I really appreciate your time, man. Thanks so much for coming on, and take care, and I'll talk to you soon.
Well, thank you. Good questions, and I appreciate your patience. I know we had this scheduled once or twice, but we finally got it to happen.
Yeah. All right, man. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Take care.
If you are not on the Elite Man newsletter yet, make sure you get on it right now. Go to elitemanmagazine.com/newsletter and sign yourself up today. Get all of our bonus podcast information, sneak peeks into upcoming shows, behind the scenes content, special offers, and exclusive Elite Man updates found absolutely nowhere else. You are basically getting a sneak peek into all Elite Man content, activity, and updates and news. You will be the first person notified when anything Elite Man related happens. I'm telling you, it's basically like getting a sneak peek into Elite Man headquarters. Go to elitemanmagazine.com/newsletter, sign yourself up, and become a true member of the Elite Man community. I look forward to speaking to you soon. elitemanmagazine.com/newsletter. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that episode. But before you go, there's one last thing I'd like you to do, and that's this. Subscribe to our podcast right now if you haven't already. By subscribing to the podcast, you get every single episode the minute they're released. Get all of our Elite Man podcast episodes and all of our world-class advice absolutely free. Subscribe now if you haven't already and become an Elite Man today. And yes, if you do love the podcast, leave us an amazing review. We really do appreciate it.